Black teen laughed out of courtroom, then reveals he's the prosecutor's son. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comments. The laughter came in waves, low at first, then careless and loud, echoing off the polished wooden walls of the courtroom. It wasn't meant to be cruel, not openly. It was the kind of laughter people use when they believe the outcome is already decided. When the bailiff called the name Ezekiel Williams, heads turned, eyes skimmed him, and judgments were passed in seconds. 16 years old. Slim frame. Thrift store jacket a size too big. Hands folded tight in front of him like he was trying to keep himself from shaking apart. To them, he looked exactly like what they expected trouble to look like. The charge was small on paper, tampering with school records. But in that county, it was a gateway charge. A mark that followed you. The prosecutor smirked as he adjusted his cufflinks, already rehearsing the sound bite he'd give reporters later. The judge barely glanced up. Even the public defender sighed, the kind of sigh that meant let's get this over with. Ezekiel stood alone at the defense table, the weight of every assumption pressing into his shoulders. They didn't know the story. Or maybe they didn't care. Ezekiel had been a straight-A student until the day his counselor lost his transcripts. Until his scholarship application mysteriously flagged him for discrepancies. Until the same school official who once praised his discipline quietly suggested he aim lower. When Ezekiel asked questions, doors closed. When he pushed back, the accusation came swift and clean: you altered the records. It sounded official. It sounded final. And now here he was, surrounded by people who had already decided he was guilty because the system said so. When the prosecutor asked him to state his name for the record, Ezekiel spoke clearly. Calmly. Too calmly for someone who was supposed to be afraid. A ripple of murmurs followed. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow, amused. Do you understand the seriousness of these charges? He asked, voice smooth with confidence. Yes, sir, Ezekiel replied. I understand exactly how serious this is. That was when the laughter returned. Someone in the gallery snorted. A clerk shook her head. The judge tapped his pen, impatient. To them, it sounded rehearsed. Like something a scared kid says after watching too many courtroom shows. The prosecutor leaned forward, ready to deliver the blow. Then you understand, he said, that lying further will only make this worse. Ezekiel swallowed. His fingers tightened. But he didn't back down. I'm not lying, he said. And I'm not alone. That earned a full laugh. The kind that dismisses without listening. The prosecutor chuckled, shaking his head. Is that so? He asked. Who exactly is standing with you, Mr. Williams? For the first time, Ezekiel looked past the judge, past the jury box, past the prosecutor himself, toward the double doors at the back of the courtroom. They are, he said. The doors opened. The sound wasn't loud, but it cut through the room sharper than a gavel. Footsteps followed. Steady. Unhurried. The murmurs died as people turned to see who would walk into a courtroom unannounced. A man in a tailored suit stepped forward, posture straight, eyes focused. He didn't rush. He didn't explain. He simply handed a folder to the bailiff and nodded toward the bench. The judge froze. Because everyone in that room knew him. District Attorney David Williams. The most feared prosecutor in the county. A man whose conviction rate was legendary. The same man whose name sat embossed on the very letterhead the young prosecutor at the table used every day. The laughter vanished. David Williams's gaze finally landed on Ezekiel. It softened, just enough to notice if you were looking closely. Good afternoon, Your Honor, he said. I apologize for the interruption. I believe this proceeding requires clarification. The prosecutor's face drained of color. Sir, he stammered, standing abruptly. I wasn't informed. No, David said calmly. You weren't. He turned to the judge. The defendant is my son. The courtroom didn't erupt. It went silent. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. The kind that forces people to reconsider every laugh, every smirk, every assumption they made just minutes before. Ezekiel stood straighter now, not because his father was powerful, but because the truth had finally walked into the room. David continued, his voice measured. I've conducted an independent review of the evidence, including school server logs, administrative access records, and internal emails subpoenaed this morning. He placed a document on the bench. The alterations to my son's records were made from an administrative account belonging to the very counselor who filed the complaint. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor looked like he might faint. And, David added, those alterations occurred after my son reported discriminatory grading practices. Which suggests retaliation. Not guilt. The judge cleared his throat, suddenly very alert. Mr. Williams, he said carefully, are you requesting dismissal? I'm requesting an investigation, David replied. Into abuse of authority. And prosecutorial negligence. Eyes slowly turned back to Ezekiel. The same eyes that had laughed now avoided his gaze. The same people who had decided his future without hearing him were suddenly uncomfortable with what they'd helped create. The judge banged the gavel. This court is adjourned, he announced. Pending further review. As people filed out, Ezekiel didn't smile. Justice hadn't felt clean. It had felt heavy. He looked at his father, searching his face. David met his eyes, pride and pain tangled together. You did good, his father said quietly. You stood when it was easier to fold. Ezekiel nodded. They weren't laughing because I was wrong, he said. They were laughing because they thought I was alone. David's jaw tightened. That's how the system works, he said. Until it doesn't. As they walked out together, Ezekiel noticed the counselor across the hall, pale and shaking, surrounded by investigators. For the first time, the power had shifted. Not because of revenge, but because the truth had refused to stay buried. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. David shielded his son, guiding him forward. This isn't over, he murmured. They don't like being exposed. Ezekiel looked back at the courthouse, the place where he'd been laughed at, dismissed, nearly erased. Good, he said. Neither am I. And somewhere inside that building, a sealed file was being opened, one that connected far more names than anyone expected. The courthouse didn't feel the same the next morning. Where there had once been laughter and careless certainty, there was now tension hanging thick in the air, like a storm refusing to break. Ezekiel Williams sat beside his father in a quiet conference room, hands folded the same way they had been the day before, but this time, not from fear. From focus. Overnight, his name had traveled fast. Social media clips showed the moment the district attorney walked in. Comment sections split in two, some calling it justice, others calling it favoritism. Ezekiel read none of it. He had learned too early that noise was designed to distract from truth. Across town, people with power were scrambling. The school counselor had already lawyered up. The principal suddenly claimed ignorance. Emails were misfiled. Servers had glitched. And yet, the deeper David Williams's internal team dug, the clearer it became that Ezekiel's case was not an accident. It was a test. A quiet experiment to see how far they could push a black teenager who didn't know he was being watched. What they hadn't planned for was blood. David stood at the head of the table, eyes hard, voice low. This isn't about one school, he said. This is about a pipeline. Records altered. Scholarships redirected. Charges filed when kids resist. He slid a photo forward, 3 other teenagers, all black, all from the same district. Every one of them pushed out. Every one labeled a problem. Ezekiel's stomach tightened. "They were laughing at me," he said softly. "Like they already knew how it would end." "They did," David replied. "Until you disrupted it." The showdown came faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, a special hearing was scheduled, ostensibly to review Ezekiel's case, but in truth, it was a pressure play. The county board demanded David recuse himself. Anonymous sources accused him of abusing his office to protect his son. The same media that praised him days earlier now questioned his ethics. The message was clear: back down. David didn't. The courtroom was packed again, but this time the silence wasn't dismissive, it was sharp. Watchful. Ezekiel sat in the front row, not at the defense table, but beside a stack of files that had grown thicker by the hour. When the opposing counsel stood, he didn't bother hiding the edge in his voice. "This hearing," the man said, "is to determine whether District Attorney Williams has compromised the integrity of this court." David rose slowly. "Integrity," he repeated, "is exactly why we're here." He didn't argue. He presented. Screens lit up with timelines. Financial records. Emails traced through private servers. Scholarship funds rerouted to shell organizations. Judges who signed off without questions. Prosecutors who filed charges without evidence. It was bigger than a school. Bigger than a county. The room shifted. Ezekiel watched faces change in real time, the way confidence curdled into fear when people realized the ground beneath them was no longer solid. Then David did something no one expected. He stepped aside. "My son," he said, "will address the court." A murmur ran through the room. Ezekiel stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. He told the truth the way it had lived in him all along. About being praised when he stayed quiet. About being punished when he asked why opportunities disappeared. About how quickly a black teenager becomes a suspect the moment he stops being convenient. "I was never supposed to make it this far," Ezekiel said. "The charge wasn't meant to stick. It was meant to scare me. To teach me my place." He looked directly at the bench. "But you laughed too early." Silence answered him. Then the unexpected happened. A clerk stood up. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "I can confirm the records," she said. "I was instructed to flag certain files. I was told it came from above." Gasps erupted. Another official shifted uncomfortably. Then another voice spoke. And another. The dam cracked. The judge slammed the gavel. "Order," he shouted, but order was already gone. What filled the room instead was exposure. By the end of the hearing, multiple officials were suspended pending investigation. The counselor was formally charged. The case against Ezekiel was dismissed with prejudice. Cameras flashed as justice finally looked like accountability. But victory felt incomplete. As they left the courtroom, David's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then stopped walking. "What is it?" Ezekiel asked. David didn't answer right away. He stared at the message like it weighed more than all the evidence they just laid bare. Then he handed the phone to his son. On the screen was a single sentence, sent from a blocked number. "You just scratched the surface." Below it was a photo. A younger David Williams. Standing beside men he had sworn he'd never align with. Men whose names now appeared in sealed documents Ezekiel hadn't been allowed to see. Ezekiel looked up slowly. "Dad, what is this?" David closed his eyes. "The part of the system I tried to outrun," he said. "And the part that's about to fight back." Across the street, unnoticed in the chaos, a black sedan idled. Inside, a man watched the Williams step into the sunlight. He smiled once, thin and patient, then made a call. "Phase 2, he said. "The boy thinks this is justice." The car pulled away. And Ezekiel, standing at the edge of a truth far bigger than his case, felt it settle in his chest. This wasn't the end. It was the warning before the real war began. The rain started the night everything came apart. Not the gentle kind that cleans the streets, but the heavy, relentless kind that turns reflections into distortions. Ezekiel stood by the window of his bedroom, phone dark in his hand, replaying the image burned into his mind, the photo of his father with men who now felt like ghosts reaching through time. For the first time since this began, the fear didn't come from the courtroom. It came from the silence. From what wasn't being said. David Williams hadn't slept. He sat at the kitchen table, jacket still on, surrounded by files he had sworn never to open again. Names. Dates. Deals. A buried chapter of his rise that had demanded compromises he once told himself were temporary. Necessary. Survival. He had built his career dismantling corruption, but the truth was cruel. He had learned the system by briefly standing inside its shadow. "They're coming," David finally said, breaking the quiet. "Not for the case. For control." Ezekiel didn't flinch. "Then we don't let them write the ending." The pressure arrived before sunrise. David was formally suspended pending review. News anchors spoke carefully now, no longer praising, no longer accusing, just circling. Anonymous threats hit Ezekiel's school. Scholarships were reconsidered. Old allies stopped returning calls. The message sharpened into something unmistakable: you exposed the wrong people. But power had miscalculated one thing. They thought Ezekiel was leverage. They didn't realize he was the key. The final hearing was called under emergency authority, sealed from the public. No cameras. No gallery. Just polished wood, cold lights, and men who believed secrecy would protect them. Ezekiel was told to stay home. He didn't. When the doors opened, he walked in beside his father, carrying a slim flash drive in his pocket. Every eye followed him, not with laughter this time, but with unease. At the center of the room sat the man from the black sedan. Silver hair. Calm smile. Chairman of the County Oversight Board. The architect. "You've caused quite a disruption," the man said smoothly. This could have ended quietly. David met his gaze. "Quiet is how you got away with it." The chairman leaned back. "And loud," he replied, "is how people get buried." That was when Ezekiel stepped forward. "Permission to speak," he said. The room hesitated. The chairman waved a hand. "By all means. Let's hear what the child has to say." Ezekiel didn't respond to the insult. He plugged the flash drive into the terminal at the clerk's desk. Screens flickered to life. "You taught me something," Ezekiel began. "That records can be changed. That truth can be delayed. But you forgot one thing." Audio filled the room. Voices. Familiar ones. Meetings held in private offices. Instructions given without names attached. Promises made about keeping certain kids out, certain funds redirected, certain cases fast-tracked. The chairman's voice was unmistakable. Color drained from the room. "I recorded everything," Ezekiel said. "The threats. The bribes. The moment you assumed I was too young, too scared, too black to matter." The chairman stood abruptly. "This is illegal." "So was framing a child," Ezekiel replied evenly. David watched his son with something like awe. This wasn't defiance. This was precision. Security moved. Phones buzzed. One by one, officials realized the trap had snapped shut. Federal agents entered without announcement. Badges flashed. Hands shook. The chairman's smile finally cracked. As he was led away, he turned back to Ezekiel. "You think this ends with me?" he hissed. "The system always survives." Ezekiel held his gaze. Only when people stay silent. The fallout was immediate and irreversible. Indictments followed. Careers collapsed. Sealed files were unsealed. The pipeline was exposed for what it was, a machine built on assumptions and protected by laughter. David was reinstated. Then he resigned. At the press conference, he didn't celebrate. He spoke plainly. Justice isn't proven by conviction rates, he said. It's proven by who the system listens to when no one is watching. He stepped back from the podium and let Ezekiel step forward. I was laughed at because they thought my story didn't matter, Ezekiel said. But the truth doesn't need permission. It just needs courage. The crowd was silent. Then it stood. Weeks later, the rain came again, but softer this time. Ezekiel walked past the courthouse, no longer as a defendant, not as a symbol, but as himself. The building looked smaller now. Less intimidating. Power had been revealed for what it was, fragile when challenged, empty without silence to feed it. David joined him on the steps. Whatever you choose next, he said, know this, you changed things. Ezekiel nodded. This wasn't about revenge, he said. It was about making sure the next kid doesn't have to stand alone. They walked away together, leaving the courthouse behind. And inside, somewhere deep in the system, new eyes were watching, this time not to bury the truth, but to guard it. Because justice had been served. And for once, it hadn't come too late.